Hey everybody, I'm JJ Johnson. You're watching Reality Survival. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about surviving the end of the world as we know it. I'm not sure exactly who coined the phrase "the end of the world as we know it." It may have been James Wesley Rawls. I'm not really sure. I know that that's one place that I've heard it that went back quite a ways, but basically TEOTWAKI, or the end of the world as we know it. It describes a situation to where there's a total collapse of our economy and our infrastructure. There's pretty much lawlessness everywhere. And it's kind of the go-to scenario that a lot of survivalists and preppers talk about. And so I want to cover what I think are 5 key things that I think are going to be really important to consider and to put into your planning and your mindset for you to be able to survive in the end of the world as we know it, and to be able to help to rebuild the country better than it was previously. Now, for the example, to put this in context of what I'm talking about, you should read the book Patriots by James Wesley Rawls, or you could also read 1 Second After by Forstner, I think it is. Both of those are great books, and there's a whole series to each one of those. And you know, if you read those or listen to them via Audible, which I'll have a link in the description below, where you can get a month free, I think, when you join up, free audiobook and a month free. So this is, I've got some notes down here that I'm kind of going after because I want to make sure that I hit them. The video was given to me, or the idea for this video, excuse me, was given to me by a video that the Bearded Woodsman put out, and I'll put a link to that video below, where he talks about the idea that going out into the wilderness and surviving long term is really nothing more than fasting. Okay, and he's exactly right. And in most cases, for most people, that is exactly what it's going to be. The idea that you can hunt and gather enough food for yourself and your family is a very, very hard prospect in the wilderness that we have here. Now, in some other videos, I was recently talking about hunting, and I think that it will be an important aspect of it, but we'll get more into that later. But the bottom line is that living in the woods permanently, long term, on your own is not an option. It's not a realistic option. And if you think it is, you are delusional. and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just trying to get you to wake up to reality here. So let me talk about these 5 things that you need to consider for surviving in and after the end of the world as we know it. Okay, the first thing is you have to join a group, okay? At some point, you are going to have to join a group, all right? You cannot survive on your own. You cannot do all the things that you need to do effectively on your own. You just can't. And that's why, as evidence of this, it's why people don't live on their own now. You know, very few people have ever been able to accomplish that. And even when they did, it only lasted for a certain amount of time, and they still had some reliance on outside society. So if society is no longer there anymore, then that should tell you that it's not going to be able to happen. You might be able to go a few months, okay? I mean, I get that. And you might need to go a few months, and my own current plan would be that I would, I might want to separate from society for a while until things start to return to normal and to calm down a little bit. Okay, there's going to be a wave of general chaos that happens at the very beginning, and you don't want to be a part of that. And in your situation, maybe you can avoid that by staying in your house, barricading yourself in, and having your supplies and everything there. That might be an option for you. It depends on your situation, where you live and all that kind of stuff. Or you might need to leave your home and go out into a more remote area. There's so many variables out there, it's just hard to tell. But you do need to consider that at some point you're going to need to integrate into a group of like-minded people. Um, I think that it makes sense to try to integrate into a group before the crash rather than after the crash. After the crash, it's going to be a lot harder because people are not going to, because of all the nastiness that happened in that initial wave, people are not going to want to trust people. It's going to be a lot harder. If you make relationships, you form relationships now, it's going to be a lot better for you and your family in the long run because you'll have a chance to get to know people. You'll know people's strengths and weaknesses and all that kind of stuff, and you can better exploit that for helping the group as a total, as a whole. So as far as group size goes, it really just depends. I think it depends a lot on your area, how close you are to big, urban centers, all that kind of stuff. But probably the very minimum is that you're going to need at least 9 members to be able to pull security. 9 adults or people who are old enough, teenage age or so at least, to be able to pull security, because security is going to be a huge factor in in any kind of SHTF or TEOTWAWKI kind of event. People will want to take your stuff, and you have to be willing to defend that. And so security is going to be important. So I think 9 is the smallest if you look at having 3 8-hour shifts per day, and then having that rotated on a couple of days basis. That way the other members can get in work, into the work schedule. Then you're going to need at least 9 or more. And it certainly wouldn't hurt to have more. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm terrible at my numbering system. I just noticed I number these wrong. The second thing is you are going to have to establish what your core values and principles are, and you need to do this now. Okay, you need to war plan things in your head. You need to go through scenarios. You need to think about these kind of things, like what would happen in this situation if, whatever. What are you going to be willing to do to defend yourself, and what are the lines that you're going to draw in the sand that you're going to say, I'm not going to be that guy. For instance, are you above cannibalism? Is it something that you would do or you would not do? That's something that you need to think about. Are you above stealing from someone else? Would you be willing to steal from someone if it meant feeding your own kid? Some people will, some people won't. The bottom line is that you need to establish your core values and principles now, and you need to make sure that you don't violate them once the crash happens. The reason I say that is, and this is a difficult concept to grasp, kind of, but the psychological effect of violating your core values and principles is going to be devastating in the long term. And maybe you'll have the food that you need for another day or two, but the idea that you just killed an innocent kid's mother to get that food is going to be something that's going to affect you in such a way that you're not going to be able to thrive happily in that kind of environment. Okay? People around the world live in rough and difficult situations all the time, and they're able to still maintain their values and their principles. In the prepper and survival community, a lot of people talk about it, and I guarantee we'll get comments in this video that say people are going to be savages no matter what, they're going to do anything and all that kind of stuff. And some will, but there's also a bigger portion of society that won't behave that way. And so you need to decide where you're going to be on that spectrum, and try to look out for other people that are like-minded, maybe add those members to your group and all that kind of stuff so that you can grow your community and all that kind of thing. But it's important to know. You need to think about that ahead of time, and that's all this whole thing really is a a thought exercise. So okay, so number 3. Whatever group it is that you join, and like I said, eventually you will have to join one way or another. And I would much rather do it as a member of the group as opposed to somebody who's been forced into labor or something like that for a group that's more well armed and better trained and all that kind of thing. So anyway, the third thing is your group is going to have to juggle multiple priorities at once. Okay, security, water, medical, logistics, and food are going to be constants that are all competing for the lead resources. They're all going to be important. There's not one that's more important than the other. The idea that there is one priority that is more important than the other is false. Okay, all of these things are going to be equally important, and they're going to have to share the priorities all at the same time. Now let me just go into, so essentially you're going to have some members who are always doing security. You're going to have some members who are gathering water and, purifying water. You're going to have other members that are going to need to be able to take care of medical situations. Logistics are a constant thing. I mean, when you look at the military, look at how much resources is put into logistics, supply, resupply, fixing things, making sure that you're ready to go for whatever the next event is. I mean, this takes a lot of stuff. But food is another one, and this is actually going to be the next one on the list. I guess it's 4. Food procurement is going to be very labor intensive. Okay, the only way that you can survive long term in the end of the world as we know it kind of situation, or SHTF kind of situation, is by exploiting all of the following options. Okay, hunting. You will need to hunt. All right, meat is, as the bearded woodsman talked about, meat is a great way to procure the calories that you need to be able to sustain your body weight and not just eventually starve yourself. All right, so hunting is going to have to be key. Now that's going to be both planned hunting and targets of opportunity. Both of those things you need to take advantage of. Fishing's another thing. And I'm not just talking about fishing with a pole or all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about fish traps. I'm talking about, whatever you can do to, get fish on a regular and reoccurring basis to incorporate into your diet. The next thing, and probably one of the most overlooked things, it's like it's talked about in the prepping community, especially amongst the homesteaders, but it's not really given a lot of priority in a lot of videos that I see talking about this, and that is livestock. Okay, raising of chickens, goats, rabbits, small cattle, earthworms, even not just for eating, but to put in your garden and all that kind of stuff. These things are going to be wildly important. Okay, the productivity of eggs, that's a very calorie dense food that's good, nutritious and good for us. And you can get about 220 to 240 eggs or so out of a chicken per year. If you've got multiple chickens, maybe a dozen chickens or so, that is going to make that battle towards establishing that calorie base a whole lot better. Plus, obviously, once they stop laying so much, you can breed them off, have them be brooders, and then have new chickens, and then end up slaughtering that one. Goats, with goats, you've got the production of milk, which is obviously calorie dense. You can produce cheese, and you can also use them for meat as well. Again, when you're breeding these animals and on a reoccurring basis and trying to grow your stock, this is how you become prosperous. Rabbits, for example. Rabbits put out more meat production than any other small animal. They put out more meat per ratio than a cow will. You can breed rabbits every 21 days, and then they look at having about 8 or so per litter at a couple of pounds. In 8 weeks, there'll be a couple of pounds of meat per rabbit. So this is a great way to supplement your protein base and your calorie base and all that kind of stuff as well. when you think about it, think about back to the biblical times. How did they measure wealth in some of the Old Testament stories and stuff? It was by how large your flock was, and how many people you were able to feed and all that kind of stuff off of that flock. So I think livestock is probably one of the most overlooked sources of food that will be available to people after shit hits the fan kind of situation. The next thing is gardening and agriculture. It's going to have to obviously start small and doing, gardens like they did in the victory gardens for World War II and stuff like that, just what you can garden for your own. This is important, not as much for the calorie base, but I mean, it does help for the calorie base, but it's more so for the nutrition, the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, and all that kind of stuff that comes with fresh vegetables, the fiber and all that kind of stuff as well, mixing in that diet with that meat and all that. That is huge. Large-scale agricultural will need to return eventually because you'll need to have excess that you can trade and sell and all that kind of stuff. We'll talk more about that later. The next thing is scavenging. Scavenging will be a crucial part of your plan for survival. If you take the estimates of 90% kill off in the first year or two, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's left. Buildings, businesses, a lot of parts, pieces. There's going to be food in places. There's going to be, now a lot of it will also be picked over by other people, but the bottom line is that you will need to scavenge, especially for a while until things get reestablished, because you just never know what you're going to be able to find. So it will be worth the effort to, and you can kind of look at The Walking Dead for that. That's a primary way that they're surviving at this point. But I think that's a realistic thing because there's a lot of resources around you in the world, and you're going to have to take advantage of that. So the last thing is edible plants. As the Bearded Woodsman pointed out in his video, edible plants it's good. It's good to know, and it can definitely be helpful, especially for medicinal and herbal value kind of things. Herbal treatments of different ailments and all that kind of stuff. But edible plants to sustain yourself, on a long-term basis is probably on the lowest on the list. But it could be very helpful, especially from a medicinal and herbal kind of, perspective, in helping with, because there's just not going to be the availability of medicines and stuff. Okay, so number 5, and I guess I'm actually got 6 things because I got one last one to talk about. You and the group, once that initial wave of violence and nastiness and everything happens, really the whole time throughout it, you're going to have to plan some more, okay? You need to think about what you're going to do for winter. You're going to stock up, you're going to salt some meat, you're going to dry the meat, you're going to smoke it, you're going to can some vegetables, we're going to cut firewood, you got to, procure fuel oil if that's what kind of heater your house has, propane, whatever the case may be. Once it all happens, once you're established within your group and, the event is ongoing around you, you need to be constantly thinking about the next several steps ahead and preparing for those things. You cannot just put your head down and not be engaged anymore. You need to prepare for hostilities. What are your actions on contact going to be? Do you have rally points? What are your fallback locations? Are there supplies, all at one location, or are they spread out? And if so, where are those at? What do you do in the event of sickness and death? What if you get an infection among your group? How are you going to quarantine people? What are you going to do with the dead when they die? How are you going to dispose of the bodies? How are you going to add group members? When somebody comes along to your group, how are you going to decide, How are you going to vet that person out? How are you going to decide if you want to add them to your group or not? You're going to have an interview process. You're going to have a trial, are you just going to not add anybody to your group? These are all things that you're going to have to think about here. What are you going to do if you're going to combine groups? Maybe you have two groups that have fallen down in size and they want to come together. How does that work? How do you work on combining resources? All these things are crucially important for you to be thinking about. What happens if somebody wants to leave? You will have fights, you will have arguments, you will have people get, flared tempers and that kind of thing, and there will be nasty things said, and people will get their feelings hurt and they will leave. What are you going to do when they leave? Are they taking their share of the stuff? Are they taking nothing? You got to establish all this kind of stuff ahead of time. Okay, so number 5 and, number 6. And this is last but definitely not least, okay? You and your group have to be responsible for returning to civility, okay? The end of the world scenario is not going to last forever, okay? It's not. There's going to be a power vacuum, and there are going to be people who are going to be willing to step up and fill that vacuum. You need to be a part of that process, okay? You need to be the advocate for the Constitution. You need to be an advocate for returning to the true American way of life. You need to establish local markets. You need to get barter and trade up and going, because you won't have everything that you need to have. There will be times when you run out of a certain supply, or maybe you need a certain medicine, or maybe you need a trade or a skill that somebody has, because maybe you need something welded, or maybe who knows what it is. There's an infinite number of possibilities, but the bottom line is you and your group will have to rely on other people at some point. And so you need to return to civility. You also need to integrate yourself into a community. You need to become a useful part of that community and be involved with establishing the way that community is going to be run. The next thing is that community is going to have to join larger society as a whole. You're going to, if it's a town that you're living in, you're going to need to reintegrate into the county. The county is going to need to reintegrate with the state, and the state, the country, and so on. So, these are all things that a lot of people don't put a lot of emphasis on. Everybody talks about the very beginning part when the wave of all the hostility and everything happens. That's going to be relatively short-lived. That's not the most important thing to think about when you think about long-term grid-down events. These kind of things are the things that we need to be talking about, because we want to keep that period as short as possible and move the conversation towards reestablishing civility and reestablishing the American way of life. So, I think that working together with other people in this kind of situation that I'm talking about is going to be probably the scariest thing that you do. But it's also going to be the most important thing that we do to rebuild America. We don't want some tin-pot dictator, to anoint himself king and to be living under the tyranny of some Pol Pot or Mao or, whatever. We want things to go back to following the Constitution. All right? That's the goal here, is, get things back to the Constitution, get things back to the American way of life. And if we just withdraw and go and try to live in the wilderness and starve ourselves to death, that's not going to help anything. So I encourage all you guys to definitely consider options for joining a group. Okay, consider those options. Consider finding people. You can look for different groups on meetup.org. Maybe other internet avenues, maybe on Facebook and stuff like that. I think there are several different groups that have started up on Facebook. And I know a lot of people don't trust Facebook and all that kind of stuff, but it's one way that's out there to network with people. You could also run ads in the local paper or Craigslist or whatever the case may be. But finding people who are like-minded and who believe in your values and all that kind of stuff is going to be hugely important for surviving the end of the world as we know it. And I'm also looking for folks. You know, I have my family and I know a few folks around here in Cheyenne, but if you're in the Cheyenne area and you would be interested in discussing this more, then definitely leave me a comment in the comments below, and or shoot me an email at realitysurvival@gmail.com. Anyway, guys, let me know, what do you think are some of the most important keys to surviving the end of the world as we know it? Stick those down in the comments below. I would love to continue the conversation with you down there. As always, I certainly appreciate it when you subscribe. If you are a subscriber, go ahead and click the bell button, because that will send you an email to let you know each time that we upload. And as always, I definitely appreciate it when you click the thumbs up button, when you share it with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And don't forget to live the 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Stay safe, guys.